Let's start with the beginning. Start with your life in China before you came to the United States, your background.
Well, I mean, I was born in 1965. I'm 41 years old today. And I went to the school when I was 6 years old, and I go through the normal stage in China through the high school. And I went to the medical college in 81, and I graduated of 87. I came to this country to study neuroscience at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. And then I went to Harvard Medical School in Massachusetts General Hospital to do the research work, and I passed the medical board exam, so there and was certified by the U.S. board. And in 1997, I got to know Falun Gong, so I practiced that. I felt that was great, and that's truly what I had been looking for. So that's about my background.
All right, you've mentioned Falun Gong.
Yeah.
What is that?
Falun Gong is a kind of cultivation system. It contains 5 sets of exercises, including 2 sets of meditation. One is standing meditation, the other one is sitting meditation. And besides that, it also has a kind of cultivation principles, and it's principles of truthfulness, compassion, and forbearance. The practitioners need to comply with these principles all the time, trying to improve themselves. We always try to look into our inward, see like what is wrong with ourselves, how we can improve ourselves to be a better person, all the way, so like this. When you do meditation, then your mind will be, blank of those bad thoughts, because you have been practicing this cultivation all along. So that would be very effective to improve your, health in a sense, because the body and the soul is all together at that time.
Is this like a religion?
It is not real religion, because we do not worship anybody. We don't have any kind of format, if you, as you see in other religions like temple or church, that kind of things. We don't have like any specific, organizations like you have to join in to swear or whatever. You can practice. If you like it, come. If you don't like it, go. So that's the only thing we cherish is improvement of our heart and our well-beings in daily life.
Well, some people have said that this is actually anti-religious. Is that true in any sense?
No, actually, because we believe in a sense that they are higher living beings, beyond the human being. But we're not against any religion, because anybody can believe whatever they want to.
Well, while we're on the topic, they have talked a lot about the illegal practices of your group. Breaking the laws inside China, some people being encouraged to burn themselves to death. The Chinese government has called it an evil cult. So we've had suicides, they say, caused by this belief. And some people have said that the leader of your group, which is Master Li, has said that he has supernatural powers. So we've read all of these things that tend to cast questions about Falun Gong. Would you like to comment on those, please?
I think if you compare 2 facts, then you will see what happened. Before the persecution of Falun Gong in 1999, there was no report on the suicide of Falun Gong practitioners inside China. And if you look at the history, tens of thousands of people practice Falun Gong around the world in 80 countries right now. There's no single report of any suicide or Falun Gong practitioners become crazy and going to killing people. Only happened after the persecution. When the persecution started, the Chinese Communist Party launched a massive media campaign against Falun Gong, saying that Falun Gong practitioners went out killing people, killed themselves, things like that. And if you also look at the history of the Communist Party, that's the old trick they use. When they want to persecute any group of people, they would always find excuses by making lies about these groups, say how evil they are, how bad they have been, so they need to be eliminated from the society. So the same thing happened here. They made all kind of lies about Falun Gong, how you become crazy after you practice Falun Gong, things like that. And they find out some people who really committed suicide because of other reasons. They claim this is a Falun Gong practitioner. And they made a lot of videotapes about that, and then said, we have reason to eliminate this evil cult. So that's all lies. And regarding the supernatural power, our teacher said that he recognized the existence of supernatural power, but any of our practitioners should not pursue supernatural capabilities. We only emphasize on the cultivation of our inner heart to be a better person according to the principles of truthfulness, compassion, and forbearance. That's what we all do. And that is very effective in improving the health and the mental balance and the interpersonal relations. So that is also the reason why only after 7 years, when after this what was made public, there were 100 million people inside China practice this Falun Gong until the end of 1998. So
you're saying that these stories that we hear about are primarily the result of the Communist Party of China trying to demonize your organization to justify their persecution and the elimination of you. Why are they doing that?
Well, I mean, that's a very good question, because if you look at the history of the Communist Party, they want to maintain the absolute control over the society. They do not like any person who has independent thinking and who speak out about those things they have been doing. And they have no freedom of speech, freedom of medium or press in China at all. And there is no single group which can be independent from the control of the Chinese Communist Party inside China over the past 56 years. So if anybody, say like, so many people practice Falun Gong, they believe in truthfulness, compassion, forbearance, and also these three principles acted as kind of mirror, reflecting how ugly, how brutal and inhuman the Communist Party has been. They have been using all lies, all violent means to control the society, to make people fight against each other so they can maintain control. So that is the reason why they do not want to, and they could not stand the existence of Falun Gong practitioners with so many people.
Well, we'll come back to the Communist Party a little bit later, but let's return to the historical thread with your story. You decided to leave the United States and go back to China in 2002, as I recall. What was your mission at that time, and what happened?
Well, everything I did was out of my heart, because after the persecution, I went back to China 4 times, and I was detained and arrested, a couple of times. And the first time I was detained in October 2002, I managed to escape. So I went back again. The reason I did that was...
Could I interrupt you? Why did you go back? What was your mission?
Yeah. As I said, I did that out of my heart, because there was, as I mentioned, there was no freedom of press, no free medium in China, and the Communist Party controls all medium. They have made so many lies about Falun Gong, and ordinary people inside China, they just got confused. They had no way of knowing the truth. Over time, they come to believe what the Communist Party has been saying. So that is exactly the reason why I went back. And also in China, there are millions of Falun Gong practitioners. They risk their lives to tell the truth by all kinds of means, handing out flyers, the VCDs, and tell the truth to people by word of mouth, that kind of things. And there are also people using the TV network, tap into the messages, the network, and broadcast our own programs, showing what kind of lies they have been telling.
You mean citizens are tapping into the TV network?
Exactly.
And all of a sudden somebody else's face shows up?
Yeah, and then tell the story about the persecution, things like that. That was the thing I wanted to do when I was arrested. So that's the reason.
So you went back to interject your message into the media, the television media of the country. Well, I can see why they wouldn't like that very much.
Of course. They break through their blockade of information.
Right. Did you succeed in that?
I did not. For the first time I was detained by those policemen. They did not know what I was intending to do, and then I finally a kind of chance to get away, and I flew back to America. But I left some device in there, and maybe some other information. They found out who I was, so they arrested me when I went back again. So
I see. So on your trip in 2003, you went back for another try at this.
Yeah, that's right.
And they were waiting for you. Is that it?
They actually. They have that. Maybe they have that warrant, for my arrest already in the computer system. So when I arrived at the airport, they just recognized me.
So what happened then?
They detained me, like they did not allow me go, So, and I started hunger strike for their unlawful arrest, and they did not allow me to sleep for 90 hours continuously, and then they used handcuffs to cut into my flesh to give me agonizing pain in order to force me to give up. And that's a lot of things. And also they used the brainwash from the very beginning. And they even scared me that, the CIA in America, gave them the information when I left America. I mean, of course, I knew that's a lie, because I don't think that CIA would cooperate with them in that kind of aspect.
So let's see, first of all, they detained you as you tried to come back into the country.
Yeah.
And then I suppose there was some kind of a complaint or a charge made against you.
Yeah, they made a charge. They said I was charged as intending to destroy the TV and the radio facilities, and there was a criminal law in China. Okay, that's called intending to just not intending, just destroy the TV and the radio facilities. That is under the chapter of damaging or violating people's lives, which means you have to have the result of somebody's lives being lost or properties being severely damaged, that kind of thing, to reach the extent of violating this law. And also, if you think about that, the purpose of my action was to use the network to broadcast our information, our message. If the TV network and facilities was destroyed, then I would not be able to do that in the first place. So this is contradictory. I never violated any law of that kind, or any kind actually in China, for my actions. So they just made this up in order
They charged you with a very serious crime, that you were trying to destroy a system that you were really trying to use.
Yeah, so that is, because they did not make any law like that. And because, I believe in the first place, they never thought somebody would do that kind of things. They never think of making a law, like that. So that's what happened. So there's no law whatsoever to against these kind of actions. And on the other hand, the persecution of Falun Gong practitioners by the Communist Party have been all, violations against laws they made themselves, against the Constitution.
So even if there had been a law, it would have been very selective use or application of the law.
No, actually, I don't think that is an important issue over here, because the Communist Party in China, they make the law, they can break the law anytime they want themselves without any problems, because they are above the law. So when they want to persecute people, they would use the law as an excuse, no matter the law applies or not. So that doesn't matter for them if there's a law or not. They just use that as excuse. Because I was already an American citizen, they have to use this kind of excuse to go through this kind of show charge, showing that to the American people and government that this is Charles Lee violated the law, so we put them into jail, things like that. So that's the procedure they have to go through.
Well, describe the trial.
Well, at the trial, I was not allowed to present my evidence. I have those evidence showing that how this would be done if I had a chance to succeed. And also, if you are criminal, then that you have to have a motivation why you want to do that. What's the reason behind this crime, so-called crime? So I want to tell the people at the court, say, well, the reason why I want to do that is because of the persecution. So many people have been tortured to death, and the people had no way to know the truth. I came here to let people know the truth, and this is not against any law in China, because as I talked, there is no such a law against this tapping into the network, for broadcasting the program. And also, my action is a correction to whatever they have been doing unlawfully to those Falun Gong practitioners. So I'm at the righteous side. So I want to say that my motivation and that kind of things, I want to show people how this would be done, but I was not allowed to do any of this. So there is a procedural law in China, made by, of course, by the Communist Party. So if the trial procedure is not right, is not lawful, then the verdict itself is not accepted, is unlawful too. So that's the result of the trial. So I appeared after the show trial, but they of course denied it. So then after that, they sent me to a prison in Nanjing.
So you appealed, but did they assign a defense attorney to you?
Oh, that's another very interesting story, because the Chinese Communist Party always trying to manipulate the medium and try to cheat people. The thing about the attorneys, what happened was that in China, no lawyer was allowed to defend any Falun Gong practitioners. That's kind of no for them. If they do that, they're going to lose their job right away. So in the very beginning, my brother found a lawyer, from my hometown, to defend me. Then they came to me, talked to me, saying that I cannot defend you as innocent. But what I can do is, trying to ask for the lenience from the court, say that you are guilty, but because you have not succeeded, and also because you're an American citizen, and because your attitude is good, so please be lenient. So things like that. So I told those lawyers that I cannot ask you to defend myself because that's not true. I'm innocent. So I had no lawyer at all, and then until one day before the trial, two lawyers came to me, from Yangzhou City, and they told me that they could do the defending for me as long as I accept their service. And they said this is appointed by the court. I thought about that because there's only one day left. What could they do? Okay, I said you could go in and look at my file and then tell me what you want to do on the day of trial. So 30 minutes before the trial, I met them. They told me they could do the innocence defending for me. I was kind of surprised that they could do that. I said, okay, let you have a try. So I did not realize that until I came back to this country. There was another trick used by the Communist Party, because after the trial, they told everybody, and they put this on newspaper, and they told the American government that Charles Lee was properly defended. Okay, but any of the words said by those lawyers were not taken at all by the court. Useless, totally useless. So, you can see the trick they played. Only one day before the trial, they sent two attorneys, talk to me like that. So I was, duped that in that way. So a lot of tricks, during this persecution, a lot of lies too. So, they try to manipulate, from all different levels.
All right, so now you are convicted of this serious crime and you're sentenced. What was your sentence?
The sentence was 3 years in prison. That was the maximum they could do, because I did not do anything, per se, because I was there and I tried to, but never got a chance. So their charge was intending to destroy, but never had a chance to destroy. I mean, in a sense, that's if you look at the words, that's not a crime at all. It's like I'm thinking about destroying some people's property or life, then I would be guilty of violating any law. It's not true. So that's the maximum they could do, because the law itself says if something happened, okay, the criminal could be charged 3 to 7 years in prison. It could be sentenced to 3 to 7 years. That is like the lowest to the extent to what really something happened. But since nothing happened, so they say they compare to that, they come to this charge. And they even, had the face come to me, say that they have been lenient to me, So anyway, 3 years in prison, so I was, sent to Nanjing prison, about 3 hours west of Shanghai city.
Well, describe that experience. What happened there?
Well, that is extremely depressive, actually, extremely depressed, because I managed to escape in the for the first time, 3 months ago. So they had people watching me 24 hours a day. Through these 3 years, even if I was sleeping, there were still 2 people standing in front of my bed watching me. They also have a surveillance camera in the cell I was in, and also the brainwash room. I was watched all the time for these 3 years. And then they also have some kind of sandwiching technique, which means they assigned 2 real criminals, like a rapist or like any like drug trafficker, that kind of criminals, they sandwich me, like give me this kind of space. Wherever I went, whatever I did, there would always be people watching me and sandwiching me like this. Even when I was taking shower, they would be like standing behind me and watching me taking shower. And a lot of times yell to me like, you should be hurry up because time is up. We have this activity, that activity to do. You have to hurry up. So they gave me pressure constantly. So that is one of those reasons why my heart had a problem 2 years later in prison. It was too much pressure. I could feel that all the time. And then they do the brainwash. They force me to attend those anti-Falun Gong programs, and they force me to watch those TV programs. They force me to attend the brainwash. They read those articles defaming Falun Gong, glorifying the Communist Party, all that kind of things. They force me to listen. If I don't listen, they would push me. If I don't watch, close my eyes, they would poke me. All that kind of things. They also have kind of format called condemnation sessions. It was invented like during the Japanese invasion in China. At that time, the Communist Party did not fight against the Communist Party. Instead, they stayed in the northwest corner of China, trying to develop their own army. And in the meantime, they invented a lot of techniques, methods to persecuting people, to subdue the followers, so they can become the absolute master. So the condemnation session is like this. The victim will be surrounded by a group of people. These people would yell to you, call your name, say you're like snake, you're like so bad, you should be dead right now. Things like that all the time, one after another, because they take turns. So those people, if they get tired, they can go to another place to take a rest, but the other people would come replace them. So constantly, they just yell and they give this kind of pressure to these people. And during the Cultural Revolution and many other political movements in China, many people just committed suicide. They could not take this anymore because that's too much. They destroy your self-esteem. They destroy your self-respect. They make you feel like you are not a human being. You're like rats or something even worse, rats. Nobody, So that is what they did to anybody who refused to give in.
And how long do those sessions go on?
Most of the time, it lasts for like 5-6 hours, and they had also like I didn't mention the slave labor. So like they forced you to work for 8 hours. When you went back to the cell, then they would have these condemnation sessions because you refused to sign this or do that, or you refuse to comply to all kind of so-called regulations on criminals. They'll do these condemnation sessions for hours and hours until you are really exhausted. Then you are not still allowed to sleep. They have like one group doing this, and then they left, and they had another group come in. They're fresh, they're just rested, and then they come in to continue doing these kind of things. So that's last for 3 years. All these kind of brainwashing sessions and slave labors. In the very beginning, they tried to force me to give up, my faith on Falun Gong, and they even used my mother to give me all that kind of pressure. Because my mother was having a chronic myelogenic leukemia, which was like, black cancer. And she had that for 80 years when I was arrested. So her condition was, very fragile. And when I was conducting the hunger strike, they used my mother. They came and say, like, my mother told me, what happened to her and my father, and after they got the news of my arrest, then how much blow it was to them, and they did not really wish me to stay in the prison. They wished me well, of course, but the prison policeman would tell me that again and again, if you sign an agreement like give up the Falun Gong, then you'll be released early, and so you can serve your parents, things like that. And I told my mother, this like, if I did that, I would be like living in humiliation for the rest of my life, and then you will be also living in humiliation for the rest of your life. it's against our conscience. But the Communist Party, they keep doing this to any people who refuse to give in. So that was actually that was the worst part in my prison life, because my mother died. While I was in prison, she could not take that anymore. She died in misery. The worst part was that my brother, called the prison and said that my mother was in a kind of terminal condition. It would be good to let me to go home and to visit my mother for the last time. And they waited, because my brother called and asked them to do that on 24th of January in 2005, but they waited for like 18 hours or something, more than that. And then on the second day, they allowed me to go back, but I was only 45 minutes late to see my mother for the last time. So that is another trick. You can see on the surface they say they did their part to bring you to your home out of humanity or whatever, but they did intentionally. They let you to be late like 45 minutes, so you will regret it for the rest of your life. That's another psychological manipulation to make you suffer even more. If they didn't do that, I would feel better, because I didn't have a chance to go anyway. But right now it's even worse.
You mentioned before that there was slave labor.
Yeah.
That word slave labor, how do you define that over there in China?
Well, slave labor is like invented by the head of the Communist Party, Mao Zedong, in the very beginning of the taking the power. They said that all prisoners, at that time they called the counter-revolutionaries, should be reformed through labor. And that would be good for themselves and then good for the society. So after that, all those prisoners would be forced to do labors. Many times they can find things to do to make real money for the society. But even sometimes they don't have anything to do, then they would be forced to move heavy stuff from place A to place B, just for the sake of reforming. Because they define those counter-revolutionaries like bad people. They have bad thoughts, so they have to be reformed. In a sense, they have to change your mind. You have to get rid of all those bad thoughts from your mind. So the only way is doing the labor, because Engels, one of those creators of the communism, Engels said that laboring created the human being. So they use that as a kind of theoretical source why they were doing this. So you have to be forced to do the labor all the time, so you can be a new person. So that is where that's come from. But right now, the slave labor is being used so widely in Chinese prisons. Almost everybody was forced to do that. If you refused, you would be punished severely. I could hear those people screaming, on another, place, when I was in the factory, if somebody refused or pretend to be sick, who would be like beaten and, electrified by the electric button, that kind of things. I could hear screams, and I could, I saw a lot of things like that going on. And also I heard a lot of stories. Somebody, refused to do the slave labor, then he was surrounded by, 4 or 6 policemen using the electrified buttons to, just to punish that person because he refused to do the job, do the slave labor. And many of those things export to, to other countries.
So the products that come out of China into other countries, they're very inexpensive.
Well, yeah, of course.
That's because they're produced by slave labor.
Well, I would not say that all of them are produced by the slave laborers, but the slave laborers count for, a big part of it. And even if those farmers, they are not slave laborers, but they would work for very little salary because they had no choice. If they go back to their, villages, they would have no money at all. So if they do those labors in factories for long hours, they still can make some money. At least they can live. So that is the reason, because the Communist Party in China controls all the resources. You have no other resource to feed yourself. So the only way is work for those sweat shops, that kind of, factories.
What would be some of the products that?
Well, I was forced to make Christmas lights, shoes, calendars, that kind of things, and I believe most of them exported to America. And one of these I brought here today is this shoes, is Homer Simpson shoes. Well, this is the lovely products. If you look at this, it's a funny cartoon character, and then you put your foot in here, wear this in your bedroom, but it's made in Nanjing prison. I was one of those slave laborers forced to do this, and it's exported to this country. When I bought this on the internet, I spent like $17.50 for the pair, but the labor cost is close to zero.
Well, Charles, what do you think about the great influx of material into the United States that's sold here at a low price and it's all made in China? What's your reaction to that?
Well, I think that's, for the most part, American people like that because the stuff from China is cheap. They can save a lot of money and buy a lot of stuff. But, look on the other side, when you buy these things, you save a lot of money. But what you think about the communist regime? They use this as a way to control people. They use that as a way of persecuting people. And then a lot of people from this country invest huge amount of money. Think about that, what should we do, to stand up for the conscience? Then maybe we can have some other ways. Maybe you can, invest in other countries which have, better human rights record, or, do things like that. After the Communist Party, is gone, then we can still go back to China to help the Chinese people. And the Chinese people are intelligent, hardworking people. They are very good, but not under the Communist Party's control. That is a different story. So I think, if you really have a conscience, think about that. People should really have a voice on that. Don't just do this silently, buy things and then we are happy because we are saving money. Not the only choice. We have a lot of things to do.
They speak about the market economy in China today and how wonderful that is and how China is changing to the market economy, and yet you're talking about the use of slave labor or near slave labor to produce these goods. How do you match those two thoughts together? Well,
I think the market economy is only kind of superficial slogan used by the Communist Party to attract those investment from the foreign lands, foreign investors. And if you look at the reality of the Chinese economy, it's not a market economy at all, because the Communist Party controls all the resources. If you go to China, I believe most of those investors or foreign capitalists, if they go to China, they will know the trick to do business in China. You have to have the good relationship with those government officials in order to conduct any business in China. That means they control all these resources. They give you so-called market, but they can take back any time they want. As a matter of fact, I met several, those foreign investors in Nanjing prison. One of those guys came from South Korea. He brought like $8 million to my hometown, actually. He built up 2 factories over there. After 5 or 6 years, something came out. And then he was finally found himself in prison. And all these factories were confiscated by the local officials and bought by his partners, those government officials. So the thing is, of course, there are a lot of things, like looks like a market economy, you have competition to extent, but this is only used by the Communist Party. If you look at the stock market in China, all those individual investors lose money. Because what they did was they make like false information out, they make up the news. They tell this story about how wonderful this company is. Actually, it's not. And when the investors, individual investors, pour in the money and the stock goes up, and then these people, insiders, they will sell it. So there are all these kind of tricks because all the resource and all the medium is controlled by those government officials. They manipulate the medium to tell the stories, to tell the lies. And another thing is the real estate is like developing fast in China. You can see a lot of high-rocketing buildings in all cultural cities and highways. The same thing. What they did is the government officials, they can take loans from the banks without any collaterals like those people do in this country. So that's free loans for them, and then they have these loans to build up these highways, build up the high-rise buildings, and then they they took like more than 50% or sometimes 70% of those money into their own pocket and use the rest of the money to build those things. But that would be like, quality-wise, it would be very bad. So make a huge amount of money, and then they use the real estate as a kind of magnet of the development of the economy. Well, the tricks they play is the same thing. So like they have like apartment building, like they have like 100 units over there. They have sold like during the last year, they sold like 10 of those units. But they would make those media report they have sold 60 of those 100 units, and this is like very much in demand. So the price goes up like that. And all those ordinary people, they see this kind of demand, they would worried if they don't rush in, then there will be no units available. So many people just go there to buy. So the price goes up and up, up and up. And those real estate brokers, they made a huge amount of money. And there was a survey just recently came out. There were about 3,000 billionaires defined in Chinese terms like about 12 million US dollars, the wealth. If they had this kind of wealth, they would be like counted as billionaires in China. More than 90% of them are the government officials, high-ranking government officials, or their children. So this is like, you see the so-called market economy is totally a monopoly by the Communist Party officials. They do that for their own good. They take all the money, all the resources, they control everything actually in China, the mines, the lands. And right now, if and a lot of stories, came out of China for those poor farmers. They live there, those brokers want to take this land by force, and they would be aided by those policemen. The farmers had nothing except the fish or sometimes farming tools to resist, but they're having a lot of crackdowns on these farmers recently. They have become crazy in developing this kind of real estate.
So you're saying that the visions that we see on television here in this country of the high-rise buildings and the modern freeways and the automobiles and the fancy clothes and so forth, it's largely a facade covering up corruption.
It is. It's it's extremely corrupted, and the Chinese people know that, and the Communist Party members of them know that. But for the foreigners, they still see this facade. They still see the high-rise buildings. This looks very prosperous. And it's like a window economy. They put this beautiful window outside, but inside you don't see. They don't let you see that kind of things. So you just rush in to use the cheap labors. Of course, if you have huge amount of money, of course you can use the cheap labor in China to make certain amount of money, like some companies in this country.
Will you say that the Chinese people know that the members of the Communist Party know that?
Yeah.
Surely the large American corporations know that too. And
I believe so.
And why then do they participate in it?
Well, there are a lot of reasons. The most important thing is the money, because they always use money to lure in. But some people don't realize that they do not have any bargain chips when they come to. If they really invest the money in China, and they build the factory in there, that's theirs. That's in their lands, in their hands actually, in those government officials' hands. If you do not cooperate with them, then you're going to be in big trouble. As I said, that I have met some investors ended in prison, but those are like small potatoes. If you're like big companies, of course they're going to use for a longer time, because you're big, you're very influential in the world. It's like Fortune 500, that kind of companies. They're not going to like take you down like that, like those small potatoes. But over time, when the time comes up, when they feel that it's necessary to take your property, they can do that anytime.
And you think that's possible?
And it's absolutely possible, because I've seen that myself. I see those people in prison, and what they have been through, And that's only a matter of time. If you keep pouring money in there. And another thing is that so much money is poured into the Chinese Communist Party in their hands. They use that to persecute Falun Gong. And then we know that Cisco, go to China to build up the firewall for the communists to control people over there. The Yahoo give out all the information to communist regime, and so many people were arrested and thrown into jail. I mean, it's crazy. It's pathetic.
Well, I think we're getting just a little ahead of the track that I had planned, but it's all very interesting. I want to go back to you and your experiences for a minute. I know it's embarrassing to you, and you probably, as you say, you're depressed even thinking about it. But earlier we spoke about some of the things that you endured while you were in prison. Would you cover some of those?
Well, the most important thing is that they give you no hope, or they at least try to, show you that there's no hope at all for you. And they try to convince me that if I do not comply, I would be my sentence will be prolonged, which means at the end of 3 years of the sentence, I will not be able to get out because I did not, confess. I did not give up my faith, that kind of things. They said they're still a criminal. You have not been reformed. In their term, every criminal should be reformed well before they get out of the prison. This is the function of the prison. And just to do a little comparison, because in foreign countries, if anybody who's been put into prison, that's a punishment itself, because you lose your freedom. You cannot do whatever you want to do. But in China, that's only the beginning. Being in prison is only the beginning. You have to go through all other torturement in order to be reformed in their term.
Well, how did they try to get you to confess that you had committed a crime?
Well, they did that brainwash for all those 3 years. I had no other source to know the right information about what's happened outside this world. I was surrounded by all those criminals, who were like arranged by the police authority, and I was forced to talk with those so-called policemen. They forced me to talk with them. I was forced to write the thought report or mind report. I refused to do so. They punished me severely, forced me to sit in a very little stool all day long for many days. The longest day was 48 days consecutively. Every day I was to sit in a little stool like this high. I should still sit straight. If I feel like this and that, they would come and kick me. And I was not allowed to talk to anybody. I was not allowed to watch TV or read any newspapers or books. So my brain was become like diamond after some time, and my butt hurt a lot. So that was all this kind of punishment. When I refused to do the slave labor, they forced me to stand straight all day long for 2 weeks. When I told the American consul what happened, they denied that, and they played another little trick. And on the day when the American consul came to visit me, they put a little stool beside me, like 1 meter away, and they did not tell me to sit down. Okay, and when I told this story, about being forced to stand all day long for so many days, and I was so hurt, because my back and was painful, and then they denied that. They said that I was allowed to sit from the very beginning, but he did not want to sit. So this is like they deny all those things by using these little tricks. What it's ridiculous from outside people's point of view, but they have been doing this all kind of little tricks.
You mentioned earlier that you had some kind of a heart condition. What was that?
Oh yeah, that was the time when I was actually the first started in summer of the 2004. Actually, when I was forced to do this kind of shoes, because the temperature was extremely hot. It's like 42 degree centigrade. It's about 105 degree Fahrenheit. In the room, it was packed by 60 inmates. It's about like 1 square meter per person. That's the room we was crammed in. And then even if you don't do anything, you sit there, you would sweat. We were still forced to do this kind of slave labor. So at that time, I feel like my heart was kind of weird. It's like sometimes I had like a premature heart beating, the heart rate went up, things like that. And then after that, was like okay, it's not that good, but it's okay. And then immediately after the slave labor, they forced me to write the thought report. This is another Chinese Communist term, because they want everybody, every party member to report their thoughts every month or every week, depending on the situation, which means you need to tell your superior what you're thinking in your mind and what you're going to do to correct your thoughts or your mind according to the party line. So that is how they stay in control. They control everybody's minds. Can you imagine that?
If you have a bad thought, then what?
Let me tell you my story, because they want me to do the same thing. Because they said I was a criminal. I have to report my thought. this is like Chinese standard. Because you are in China, so you have to comply to the laws of China. So I was forced to do this kind of mind report. And I refused to do so because I said this is a violation against my natural born rights. My thoughts are mine. Why should I report to you, right? So they forced me to sit there. Every day they came to me like, nagging me like, you should do this, otherwise the result will be, they give you a sense that it will never end. It will never end if you don't do that. And in the meantime, they also forced me to do to write some kind of summary about the criminal life, how I was reformed, things like that. I all refused. So that's immediately after the slave labor. They say like they wanted to put in pressure, all the time. So they have this thing and other thing all together. So I refused after like 40 some days. I feel like weird because in the first 2 weeks I had like back pain, that kind of things, and then I tried to fight back, against those physical conditions. And then after 40 days, my heart had some severe problem. I could not stand that condition anymore, so I had to lie down. So that was the situation, how that happened. Because the other thing is I I told the American consuls about this situation, but nothing happened. I was still forced to just sit. They visit me every month. That lasted like 48 days. So anyway, they only ended because my heart had a problem. I had to lie down, otherwise I would had a severe problem. So the heart problem lasted for more than half a year. Then tapered down little by little.
Do you think that you might have been treated differently if you had not been an American citizen?
That's for sure. And that is one of the reasons why they did not torture me to death, because my case drew a lot of attention, from America and also from other countries. There was a lot of pressure on the Chinese Communist regime on my case, but they still tried their best to persecute me, to try to force me to give up, to accept that unlawful verdict. If I were not an American citizen, I would be dead already. Because anybody who refused to give up, they would give you two choices. They either die or give up or comply with their requests. So that has happened to thousands of Falun Gong practitioners. As far as we know at these times, that there are 3,000 practitioners who have been tortured to death. We know their names, know their address, how they were tortured to death. But they always try to cover up. What we don't know is like tens of thousands, in a huge number, because those practitioners inside China, they risk their lives to give this message out. Somebody died, then they would do some investigation. Your co-practitioners, neighbors, things like that, would try to find a way to report this, to give this message outside by using internet, that kind of things.
To what extent is the Chinese government using Falun Gong prisoners as sources of organ mining or organ donation?
Organ harvesting has been happening for the last 5 years. And if you look at the record of the organ harvesting record in China, between the year of 1995 to 1999, there were about 16,000 transplantation operations in China. But between the year of 2001 and 2005, there were 60,000 transplantation operations. And this is like, more than triple. It's almost like 4 times difference. And that's a huge jump. And we have, conversations between the doctors and those so-to-be recipients. They called from abroad asking about the conditions of those donors. And, those doctors admitted that, they are from Falun Gong practitioners because they're young and healthy. The organs are good, are fresh. Just like you sell things in the market. This product is very good. It's good for you. Why not buy it? And we have, a conversation records over the phone, and we also have, record of those, advertisements made by those transplantation centers. They say that this is like a new era of the transplantation because you can get a kidney or things like that in a week in our center. But we know in America, you would wait for 3 years or even longer for a kidney because there are not that many donors, right? But in China, you have this kind of, speed. So that means, there must be a huge pool of these donors behind the scene. They can get those organs anytime they want. They have all those data available, like what blood type, HLA type, that kind of things. If a patient comes, then you can, just do the match right away. So that's how they operate. So that's, they have become a very systematic way to do that. So it's extremely, horrifying. And also there was a report made by the David Kilgo and David Maters from Canada. None of them are Falun Gong practitioners. One of them are a former parliamentary members of Canada. They're lawyers. They have collected all those evidence and pieced them together, showing that all these things that happened in the 5 years is true. There are enough evidence supporting this.
So what is the response of the Chinese government to this charge of organ harvesting?
Well, that's very interesting, Ed. What happened was, on March 9th, these witnesses, the reporter and the nurse, they came out and make a statement about this organ harvesting happening in China. And the Chinese government did not say anything until 3 weeks later. They said that's not true. And they invited reporters from AP and another French media, and also they invited the American embassy from Beijing to go to Sujiatun, which is located in a northeast part of China, to take a tour at that site. And then they find nothing, showing that organ harvesting happened.
That was the prison where it was happening.
Oh yeah, that's not prison. Actually, it's a hospital.
Oh, hospital.
And there's underground facility. Those Falun Gong practitioners were kept. And the American State Department made a statement saying that they did not find anything showing that organ harvesting happened. That reminds me what happened in World War II. The Nazi Germany, the Hitler invited foreign medium to visit those concentration camps for those Jews. And those people, were living happily in the concentration camps. There were deers running around, flowers all over the places. That's the exact same thing. Imagine 3 weeks passed before they invite those people to make a tour, and what can they do in 3 weeks? This is the trick they play all the time, and unfortunately, the U.S. government, has fallen into this trap.
They don't challenge it.
No, they didn't. So that is, one of those tragic, things happening in these days. When the communists tell lies, people don't just try to, challenge it. They just accept it as it is.
Charles, let's go back and make sure we've covered all of the points of your personal experience in prison there. I know there's so much that you could talk about, but what's your overall impression as you look back on it? What is your impression of that period?
It was extremely, extremely hard. I feel like I was truly in hell. Because for a lot of American people, they don't have a clue, what could be like in Chinese communist prison. What kind of dirty people they encounter, in daily life. All those, 24 hours a day, you have to be with them all the time. They play all those dirty tricks on you. They do this torture on you. They don't regard you as a person. They try to make you feel like you're dirt, you're nothing, you're nobody. You have to give up your self-respect, self-esteem to live in that place. Can you imagine that people can fight against each other just for a cup of water? Use all that kind of dirty tricks, vicious and fierce ones. It's really like hell. It's But I'm lucky now. I'm very lucky because then I got this much attention, from the outside world, so I could pull through this stage.
You have said that you felt that the regime in China, the communist regime, was very similar to the Nazis. What do you mean by that?
Well, actually, to my understanding, actually, it's even worse than the Nazis. Of course, I'm not saying the Nazis are good or something like that, but what the Chinese Communist Party has been doing is, look at the numbers. If we just look at the numbers, 80 million people in China, died because of that regime. It's more than all the abnormal deaths in Chinese history, 5,000 years of history. And it's more than any other country put together, for like a Nazi-like regime, that kind of things. In the World War II, we had only like 40 million people died. But in China, that's like in peaceful time. There's no war, against any other countries inside China, but 80 million people died. In the Big Famine alone, during the year of 1959 to 1961, 40 million people died of starvation because the Chinese Communist Party had a kind of crazy economic policy of great leap forward. They want to catch the America in 15 years. So they ordered those farmers to make steers, not instead of farming. So the farm, the grains all rotted. And then finally nobody would have anything to eat. And still they had made all these kind of false numbers, how much they produce, in on those, countryside. And then they had to, all those farmers had to pay the government everything they had. So there would be nothing left for them to eat. So people just died of starvation. And what makes things worse was that those poor farmers were not allowed to get out of the villages to beg for food because the Communist Party said that would damage the party's image. So if they try to get out, they would be like shot to death. So many people just died in villages like that, 40 million in 3 years. And look at the Cultural Revolution, and look at the crackdown on the killings, massacres in Tiananmen Square. And now the Falun Gong practitioners, tens of millions of people cannot practice what they want. They were forced to give up. If they refuse, they'll be tortured to death. All that kind of things. So, and also they have so many brainwash methods, and they use family members to fight each other. So they make people live in hell miserably. So if you look at the Nazi Germany, of course they have done all bad things, killing people randomly. But in China, it's much worse. It's lasted much longer, and people suffered much more. And people live like nobody. They don't have a self-respect. They don't have confidence. They cannot say anything they want to. They only can repeat what the party says.
So how does the Communist Party in China actually keep such close control over the people?
What they did is there are a lot of things, but the most important thing is the violence and telling the lies. Two things in the way they control people. They use violence. They kill people wantonly. It's not like anybody is real criminal. They kill the person. They kill whoever they want to, just to show other people they are the master. They can control you anytime they want, and they use propaganda. Tell lies all the time. Whenever they want to persecute anybody, they would say, this group of people or this person has been so bad, or has been doing so many bad things, and then they incite the hatred from other people. So they never persecute the majority of people as a whole, but they always isolate a small group of people, like 5% will be the target of the persecution, and another 95% will be used to attack these 5% of the people. That trick works all the time until the persecution of Falun Gong. In the history, they always set up a 5%. If anybody who falls into this category, then he's doomed. So everybody, would do whatever they could to fall into this 95%, so they can be safe. So that repeats in history over and over again. So as a result, Chinese people have lost the trust, between each other, and they would always use a way of cheating, hurting other people to protect their own interests. So that's how they maintain the control over, Chinese people. And the Chinese people, because of this long history of all kind of persecution, political movements, people become so scared. They don't even think of standing out against the Chinese Communist Party. That is, that's the terrorism, actually. State terrorism is very typical. And there is propaganda, of course. They control all kind of medium. And right now, they have become more and more fine-tuned to how to do brainwash, how to use the bad side, because there are all kind of problems in China. sometimes the media in China, they also report some of those bad things happen, say like some government officials corrupted. Then we arrest these government officials, then they punish him to show the gloriousness of the Communist Party because it can correct its own mistakes. Things like that, to make propagandas. So every time this kind of things happen will give some people hope, oh, the Communist Party is, heading toward the right direction because it's punishing those corruptive government officials. So it will be like, a good party later on. So this thing happens repeatedly again and again. Until now, the persecution of Falun Gong, it doesn't work anymore. If you look at the Chinese government and the American government, then you can see the difference because American government only controls a small part of the wealth in this nation because people pay tax, they can use the tax money, but the majority of the wealth is in the hands of people or those big companies, not to the governments. Of course, the governments can do some deals with the corporations, whatever they can do, but they still cannot have the absolute control on those wealth. But the difference is that the Chinese Communist Party, they controls all the resources. They can take any wealth from anybody at any time they want. So imagine if there is a war between these two countries, the Chinese Communist regime can mobilize a huge amount of resources within a very short period of time. And the human lives are not like their consideration. Of course, they can use all these human beings to fight a war against America. But on the other hand, this country, they have to go through the Congress to pass this law or this bill to mobilize this and that money to do the war or whatsoever. So it's going to be a sharp contrast. And as kind of example, in Korea War, America lost 35,000 soldiers over there, and that make a big problem for the American government because people are complaining in this country about the loss of human lives. But Chinese lost close to 1 million soldiers, and still the Communist Party still bragged about the great victory over the American imperialism. So that's the difference. The human lives in China is nothing in the eyes of the communists. So they can use 1.3 billion people as hostages to do the war whatsoever they want to do. So that is the difference we can see.
Let us hope that stays a difference. Some of us are concerned, Charles, that that difference is getting less and less.
Well, I think that we can work for the things to become better. As I said, if the people quit the Communist Party, people will realize the importance of human lives in China, things will change. The Communist Party will be gone.
You mentioned the possibility of a war between the United States and China. Do you think that's a possibility, a real possibility?
It is a real possibility, but I believe those people will try to make deals. Of course they want to if they can benefit from it. But if say like things happen in China, the Communist Party sees that as the end of their days, they would do something crazy. It is possible. But let's work on that. Let that not happen. Yeah, I believe the only thing is to educate people, to really realize what's the true nature of the Communist Party. So then, if people get away or stay away from the Communist Party, then it doesn't have the control and ability to make a war. So it's very, very important for the American people to understand the importance of staying away from the Communist Party. Give them less resource, give them less energy, so they won't be able to commit a war or anything like that against America. That is extremely important. You don't have to commit, you don't have to, do a war against them, but you can stay away from it, so it will become weaker and finally collapse. That's the right way to do.
As I look back over the growth of Marxist-Leninism in various countries, especially in China, we see that the rise of those regimes has been fed mainly by idealistic people who really thought that they were signing up for a worthy cause. They thought they were going to help mankind in some way or another. They had bought into the slogans of Marxism, for example. So the communists came to power in many cases a combination of deceit to some extent, but also on the wave of the high ground of morality as they sold it to the people.
Yeah, I think that's a very
But right now, what interests me about your movement is that you're pulling that out from under that rug out from under their feet. You're exposing the fact that that is not the high ground of morality.
That's right.
In fact, it's the depths. And so you agree with that appraisal?
Yeah, I think there are three different groups of people in the history of communism. The first group was those like Marx, Engels, Lenin, Mao Zedong, or those very high-rank communist officials. They knew what they were doing. They did not believe communism themselves, but they used that as a tool, as a slogan, as ideological weapon. And another group, so-called like real ideologists, they were attracted by the communism theories. And if you look at the history in China during the Japanese invasion, they invaded China, but the Communist Party, they did a lot of propaganda in the nationalist-controlled areas about the communism and about the way they want the country to be, and about the way they want to fight against the Japanese, all that kind of things. That attracted a lot of people from the nationalist-controlled area, a lot of young people, intellectuals, that kind of people. They went to Yan'an, where the Communist Party was at that time. There's another group of people. They truly believed in communism. They want to fight for that. Another group is much bigger, masses. The ordinary people, the farmers, that kind of people. They don't really understand what communism is, but they believed if they follow the Communist Party, they would get the lands, get the stuff from the landlords, that kind of things. They fight for those real stuff. What they could see in real life. So that's three groups of people form the communist movement. So that's why it spread so fast in so many countries. But as the non-commentaries in Communist Party pointed out, the communist theory itself is totally wrong, because people have their rights to own properties. They work hard for that. That's like part of their life, just like their arms or their hands. You have no rights to take that away. In the collectivism like format, like people can share their property. That's not the case. That's against human nature. It's against the rule of the universe, I would say, right? Every human being has the right to his own property, has the right to his own body. Nobody can take it away. So how can you collect all these properties and then use for other people? It should not happen. So the communism itself is a wrong theory from the very beginning. But for those poor people and for those idealist, intellectuals, they really fell into these kind of pitfalls. So that's how that, So we know right now the communism is truly evil. It's kind of evil way to control people, to persecute people, to do a lot of damage to human society. Only in this way people can really quit from the Communist Party and then end this evil practice.
In the West, you hear it commonly said that communism is dead.
Well, that's only like wishful thinking, actually. It's not dead. It's still kicking alive, in China, maybe in other countries, like North Korea, Cuba, a few of those small countries. But the thing is, they have used capitalism right now as some kind of foresight, to play with people right now. So actually what they have been doing, they are trying to everything they could to cover up. They distort the history. They tell lies about what happened in previous years, things like that, because they control the medium. So I don't think we should have any illusion, about what's happening in China. It's not like, if you engage with China, with capitalism, then the Communist Party itself will evolve for the better. It's not happening. Will not happen.
Well, that was, in fact, my next question going to be that, because it's commonly said that if we trade with China and we send them aid and we become partners with them, and as the Chinese people get used to television sets and internet and all these wonderful things, that they're going to change for the better and become more like us.
Well, that's, as I said, wishful thinking, because if you look at the communist history, during the year of 1945, when the Japanese is about to surrender, though the Americans sent a delegate to the place where the Chinese Communist Party was staying in the northwest part of China, and the Mao Zedong told the delegation members, said that we are going to build China like America. We're going to have a democratic system. We are going to have multi-party government. We're going to have people to elect government officials. All kind of beautiful things. They have even published an article in a newspaper run by Communist Party. The article says, the author said, I had a very good impression to America since I was very young. Not only because America has never invaded China, also because American people are so generous, so have such a big hearts. We love them, so we want to be like them. So American government was duped, and they supported the Chinese Communist Party in the very beginning in the Civil War, and they forced the nationalist army to stop attacking the Communist Party armies. So they had plenty of time to get the weapons from the Soviet Union, to get weapons from the Japanese surrenders, and the armies were trained by the Soviet armies. So they got strong, and they fought back against the nationalists. And then the nationalist armies lost their essence during the war against Japanese. They lost more than 3 million soldiers, all good soldiers. So that is why and how the communists came to power in China. And the same thing happening right now. They say that we're going to do trade with you, that we're going to become market economy, you're going to become this and that. But actually, if you look at the China itself, everything is still controlled by the communists. And they still have the information blockade in China. Nobody can know the truth in China. That's what's happening. If we have this wishful thinking they're doing trade with them, actually we are sending the money in the Chinese Communist Party hands. They become bigger and bigger. They continue to persecute the Chinese people. And when they are big enough, they're going to do something against America for sure. And they have put out the threat already, recently. They could use, nuclear bombs, that kind of things against America.
Let's get on that one more solidly. Are you saying that the Chinese Communist Party still considers America to be enemy number one?
Well, actually, if you look at the propagandas made by the Communist Party in China, right now, they say that Taiwan is the most sensitive issue for Chinese Communist Party, or for Chinese people. They use this word.
People.
And of course, people. Yeah, the word people. And then they say behind that is America, of course. You see the point? You see the linkage? So America is the biggest democratic country in this world, for now. But the Chinese communists see that as a big threat, because nobody in this country likes communism, at least on the surface. So that is how they are doing the propaganda in China.
Well, what happens, do you think, when finally the Chinese government feels that they have an advantage over the United States?
I think they can do anything they want, because first of all, they can confiscate all those properties of American companies in China, because they have huge investment in there. If they feel like they should do this, like what Cuba did, they had all those properties from those from the American companies. They took them all. You can get nothing back, and then they can use those so-called evil countries like excess of evils like North Korea, this kind of countries, to play cards with America, to force you to give all these kind of benefits to them. So a lot of cards they can play if you don't stand against them right now. And also they have the 1.3 billion Chinese people as hostage. Can you imagine they use their own people as hostage when they when they want to do some deal with America, they would release one or two of those political prisoners, say that we are showing the gesture of improve the human rights. You have been asking us to improve the human rights. We are doing this right now, so give us some such and such, make deals with you. But after this deal is finished, then the prisoner will be catch again, thrown into prison again. So that's what they play. It's totally ridiculous. How can a government use its own people as hostage to deal with foreign governors?
How will that ever be changed?
Well, I mean, we have been persecuted for more than 7 years. In the first 4 years, we gave them enough chances to correct their wrongdoings, to stop the persecution, because we have been practicing truthfulness, compassion, forbearance. We have never had any political agenda. We have never been interested in political power. But they refuse to acknowledge that, even though they knew it. They refuse to recognize that in public. They continue the persecution because they don't see that they can stop. They don't think we should exist because, as I talked about the reasons. So there is a book finally came out. It's called 9 Commentaries on the Communist Party, which tells the true nature of the Communist Party, the evil nature and what they have been doing to Chinese people and to people around the world. Actually, they also exported those violence to other countries like Cambodia, Indonesia, all that kind of Southeast Asian countries. And we appeal to the Chinese Communist Party members to quit the Communist Party. So in this way, if they lose the support from the ground, they are going to be disintegrated. So that's what's going to happen. Well,
this book, this series of essays, excellent, by the way, that's being distributed in China, is that correct?
Yeah, that's right.
And how is it being printed? It must be underground?
It's underground, but there are a lot of people in doing that. Even those non-Falun Gong practitioners, they do that because they think that is truth, that is good for China. They use all kind of ways, piracy or smuggle from outside the country and distribute and widespread. So a lot of people have read it and a lot of people heard it. Many people have already quit.
So this book is very, very important. How do we get hold of a copy of it?
Well, you can download this book at the website www.epochtimes.com, spelled as EPOCHTIMES, epochtimes.com, and it's for free.
It's for free?
Yeah, you can download it anytime you want.
Wonderful. That's how you work.
Yeah.
So what impact is this having? What's happening as a result of that?
It is very clear that the Chinese Communist Party is losing control inside China. But they still, of course, until the very minute, when it collapsed, they will still maintain the control over the medium, at least on surface. They will still tell everybody to the Chinese, Chinese Communist Party is great. Our economy is flying. Every year there's 10% growth. It's amazing. Look at these high buildings. They still tell the story until the minute they collapse. So that's what will happen. Even though, tens of millions of people already quit, but they still tell the same story over and over again. Every year is 10% growth of economy, things like that.
Now explain that. We say people have quit. What does that mean?
They have announced over the internet, say that they quit the Communist Party. They will never have anything to do with the Communist Party. They will not follow the party lines. They will not, pay any fees, because you have to pay the party fee, every month. So that kind of things. So actually, if for the Communist Party to continue to do all those bad things, even for their exist, they have to have the kind of ground so they can get energy and the resource from those members. So if people all come to realize the true nature of the Communist Party and they all quit from them, then it's going to be over.
So the picture then that is emerging here is that because of the activities of your organization, it was not even an organization.
Yeah,
it's
people,
a
practitioners.
Network of practitioners. And the distribution of this book is spreading wildly throughout China.
Yeah.
And the impact is that people from inside the Communist Party are now resigning in large numbers.
Yeah.
And the organization is being torn apart from within.
Yeah, that's
falling
right.
apart from within.
And also, because we have been doing this in a peaceful way, because we have been practicing the 3 principles, truthfulness, compassion, and forbearance, in the past 7.5 years almost, even though the Communist Party has been using all evil ways in human history, anything you can think of, but there is not a single case in which the Falun Gong practitioner used any violent means to fight back. So we have been, practicing forbearance since the very beginning. So in that way, the Communist Party would have no sense of fighting, because every time they want to fight, there's nothing, there's no resistance. So they lose their energy in this way, because if they had the resistance, they could get rebooted. But right now, they don't have this way to get re-energized. So they are losing control because they don't know what to do.
I know it's hard to predict, but what do you see for the future?
Well, I do not want to give the exact time. It's like 3 years, 2 years, but it's coming soon. It's not, like a next generation. It's like very soon, because you can see this speed. Right now it's like 20 to 30,000 people quitting the party, and they got organizations every day. And it's growing, they're like, it will be like exponential growing. So we can see that very fast.
So this makes the party very, very worried.
Yeah, they are. Because they have like a bottom line, because they said anybody, okay, like foreign investors or the so-called democratic movement activists, if you get away from Falun Gong, then we are going to do this deal and that deal with you. You're going to get a lot of money or get a lot of opportunity to make money in China, things like that. So they're buying people off, because the only thing they want to do is don't do anything with Falun Gong, So that is their bottom line right now.
Well, how successful are they?
Well, they have been very successful in certain part. And we have seen, as I mentioned, those big companies go to China to help the Communist Party to do those persecution, build up firewalls, telling that kind of people, what they are doing, and also sending the money into the Communist hands itself is helping them, because they have the resource, to pay those policemen to buy all kind of, weapons, that kind of things, on persecution and monitor people. That all cost a lot of money. So it's being helped by those capitalists from, America and many other countries. So they have been quite successful, but the truth is the truth. If we know the truth, if we practice it, and if we spread it, and then we will finally, get it over.
You made a very interesting comment earlier in our private conversation about the importance of conscience, and that came after a discussion of how seemingly it is that many people in China now have lost their conscience and are pursuing material things, as more or less as it's happened in the United States. Would you give us your thoughts on that, please?
I think that's a very disturbing, if you look at this situation, because if you go to China, you would see, many people in China, they just don't care about anything else except money. They want material wealth. And I have read some reports, at which some people want to commit suicide. They climb onto the top of the building. They want to jump. Hundreds of observers were there waiting to look at the scene, because it's going to be like a movie. If sometimes when the suicide hesitated, that other people would tell him to jump. What are you waiting for? We want to see that. So that's like morality is like corrupted to such extent. Conscience would be like out of their mind. What's that for? What's that? Why do we want that? Same thing. If you look at those capitalists, who goes to China to invest money, they don't care about the persecution of Falun Gong. They know, they think that those people who practice truthfulness, compassion, or forbearance are a band of nuts. Why don't you make money? That's all.
I understand. I would like to say, however, these people that they call capitalists are not really. They're collectivists. Just because they have a lot of money doesn't make them capitalists. But you're certainly right on that.
Well,
and
maybe I got this notion from the communist propaganda.
Yes,
capitalists are bad, things like that.
Right.
Anyway,
those are not capitalists.
Whatever who they are, but they went to China to give those Communist Party the money, and then for themselves to make money. So that's a lot of help for their.
Well, how do you compare this with the traditional Chinese morality?
Well, we have the word compassion in China since the very beginning of China's culture. It has been advised that any ruler, in China should have compassion to people, to the mass. If you don't have that, you're not deserved to be on that position. You should be toppled. You should be thrown away by people if you don't have the compassion. But the Communist Party, they never regard themselves as compassionate. They just want to, stay in absolute control. So that is why they have done everything possible to destroy the Chinese culture. So if you go to China, a lot of things have been lost. A lot of them, like the way of dealing with people, compassion, tolerance, and the reasonable, way of thinking. They don't have those anymore.
So they're the product of the communist system themselves.
Exactly.
And yet, young people like you, newer generations, have it for some reason. How did that happen?
Well, I think, this is, come from the practice. Because before I got to know Falun Gong, of course, I want to, make a better life. Everybody has the right to do that. But I would think myself in the first place, because how I can benefit. Anything I encounter, I would have this thought. But right now, I was thinking, what is the way of justice? How, people should maintain a good society, a good interpersonal relationship. How people can benefit from, be nice to each other. There's a totally different way of thinking, and then we know, the true reasons behind that, and we believe that will bring the human society, and then the future will be bright. If everybody knows it and practice it. So that's 3 words: truthfulness, compassion, forbearance. That is what we have been practicing, since I got to know Falun Gong.
Well, that's very encouraging to think that these principles can spring from the heart and from the soul.
That's right.
And not necessarily from the traditions.
Well, it is. I would say, most of the part, is from the traditions, because, Confucianism taught Chinese people to be tolerant, to be compassionate, and those Taoist schools taught people to be truthful. Also those Buddhist schools, they taught about compassion. So all these essence all exist through the history. So what we have in practice is like we practice all of them. So that is why, as I mentioned, there has not a single case in which Falun Gong practitioners use violence, fight back against the Communist Party in the last 7.5 years. That is because we have been practicing this from the heart, bottom of our hearts. And we comply to these principles all the time.
And yet you're not just completely passive. You stand for what you believe in.
Yeah, that's right.
And you confront the system.
That's right.
And you're there 10,000 strong if necessary to let your views be known.
That's right.
That's a little different than some people who just feel that they should quietly accept the system.
No. We are not accepting it, because what we did in the first 4 years was giving them a chance to correct their wrongdoings. If they refuse to give up, then we are going to do something else, But of course, still being peaceful, but that will result in differently. So that's what happened.
What concluding message would you like to give to our viewers?
I think the persecution of Falun Gong in China is not like a Chinese issue. It's like issue of human being. Everybody should look into that, because we have been practicing the principles is what really a human being needs. If everybody practices that, the human society will become, much, much better. And what Communist Party has been doing is not only damaging to the Chinese people, but also to the people in the world. And if you look, study the history, then you can see, how they exported the violence to other countries, and how they use Chinese people as hostage to, hijack those resources. And if you just sit around doing nothing, then we'll see this tragedy happen over and over again, and we'll finally get to you. And as for the Falun Gong, because it has just came out this year, this is like a new format of crime, never happened in human history. If we see this still doing nothing, then I think the human being will be over. So everybody should stand up to say no to the Communist Party, to stay away from it. And if the Communist Party collapses in China, then it would be great for Chinese people and for the world as a whole.
Thank you. 生归正道，江山复清明。苍生归正道。